prompt engineering, which
Yes.
is something that a lot of people should think about too. And a lot of people are just dropping in prompts. But if you start looking into prompt engineering, it's literally 15, 30 minutes. You can really actually level yourself up to do things like tree of thought.
What follows is a conversation with Nate Roybal, a distinguished B2B sales and partnerships leader known for turning complex challenges into profitable ventures. His recent accomplishments include exceeding sales quotas and spearheading white label product strategies at Syncari as the Director of Partnerships and GTM Strategy. Nate and I talk about his background in sales and his career journey into RevOps and systems orchestration, how enterprise versus SMB buyers buy and who holds the influence in those buying cycles, how to become and build custom GPTs and why for your organization, his creation of a Syncari specific custom GPT, AI literacy is a standard skill set people will need to have, and AI literacy versus the rising function of prompt engineering. Let's listen in. Nate, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you again.
Always. So this is always really fun with people that I know, because I know a very narrow slice of you. And so we get to figure out how did you become to be the Nate that we know and love? And then you're doing really cool stuff because you were a fan of the show and obviously we're friends. And you were like, hey, I'm doing so much AI stuff. I really want to tell you about it. And so I conned you into not just telling me about it, but telling the masses.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into AI stuff, I like to help give people context on who we're talking to and why. And I actually don't know anything about you before how and what I know you now. So maybe as a good starting point is what is your background? How did you come to be in the position you are today and have a perspective on GTM and AI? And you can start back as far, you can go all the way back to your birth if you think it's relevant.
I'm going to tell the story a little differently than I normally do.
Sure.
And I don't usually like to call this out, but I think that AI is really good for people like me that have dyslexia and ADHD. Really, it's been amazing for me in that world. And so is a lot of the technology advances. And so I think that is a big part of my story, right? So when I started out in sales, I was maybe 23 and I kind of dropped out of college the third time or maybe fourth time. I don't know. At that point, I was kind of messing around. Found this telecom reseller job, started picking up the phones and smiling.
What did you sell to who?
I was selling to anybody who wanted cable, jacks or racks, baby. It was startups in the Bay Area. It was a random mom and pop shop. It was some, implementers or installers, stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty much anyone and everyone. And sometimes I would just find shit on Amazon and just ship it in. But, you got to do what you got to do. And did that for 3 or 4 years and realized I needed to use my brain more. It was more like, hey, color, how fast can you get it? All that stuff. I was like, this is not doing it for me. So back to school nights, got my degree, and tried to get into SaaS. They didn't want me as a salesperson, despite I've been doing it for years. And so I went as an SDR, right? And, luckily, this was right around the time, things like Outreach came out. There was really good spell check, all this stuff too, right? So just when I had to start writing emails all day, every day, spell check was there.
Emails got really easy.
Yeah, and all these templates were there. And so, I still can't spell very well, right? A lot of people don't know that, right? I'm a director.
You're inhibited by I always have something checking my spelling, so I have no clue. I just smash words and it works out.
Exactly. It's been great for me. They told me when I was a kid, you're not going to have a dictionary in your pocket. And I was like, guess what?
I'll do one better.
Yeah, I've got it actually writes the thing for me. But yeah, so then I got into SaaS and I was kind of interested in I didn't know what Workato did. Right. So I had to skill up very quickly. And I was like, what is integration? What is all this?
Workato was SaaS company one?
Yeah, it was a SaaS company in 2017. So that was 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago now. Basically worked my way up from the bottom, right? So I became an AE and then I was doing events and then I became, right when COVID hit, no more events, and I became a partner manager, right? And that's kind of when I think you and me got connected, right? Back when I was, about 4 years ago now.
I need to do we need to have a retro on the show. The number of people that start in SDR backgrounds, I think that there's part of the reason everyone glorifies and vilifies it at the exact same time. Everyone's like, you have to go through the grind house that I went through. And I think, but I feel like most people that I know that are doing interesting, successful things in GTM, at one point did that. And I think that it both creates grit, but to your point, it also creates a level of actual knowledge of how things work that helps tremendously.
And I think it depends, right? It depends because there's just like any other motion, there are places you go that everything's on rails. Follow the script, follow these templates. click and that's your job, right? But then like, Workato, I was like the second SDR, basically hired at the same time as the first SDR, like a week later. And so we didn't have enablement. We didn't have tech support, right? So I had to just learn everything. And that's how I got really good at what I do now, which is understanding all these integrations and things like that. And that was able to kind of propel me to be successful today and kind of also like get interested in things like AI and kind of, I'm not a coder, but I can do almost everything all the way up to coding. And maybe one day I'll take the plunge. Probably not. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here, right? And yeah, AI has been really great. So happy to talk more about that. But
and what the Syncari journey is sort of getting to a place where you were like, hey, Syncari looks really cool and interesting, and I'm excited about what these guys are doing. And then to now looking at how AI is impacting your role, and then we'll jump into some of the stuff you're actually working on.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was at Workato and I kind of saw this gap in the market, which, was traditionally solved by master data management. More modern approaches, hey, let's get a Snowflake or a modern data stack and let's, do this big architecture move, right? But there was no real answer to customer 360 unless you could build it all in HubSpot, right? Which some of your customers can, which they're very lucky, right? But, people that have much more complicated systems, it's really hard to do that, right? And it's not HubSpot dependent. It's not any app dependent. It's like ecosystem dependent.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when I realized that's the problem they were solving, that's a problem I wanted to come solve. And, we've been trying to figure out how to solve it the right way for the last many years, but it's been fun. And
what do you own at Syncari right now? So we'll fast forward a little bit to like, what's your role today? What are you spending your time on? And then we can jump into some of the actual cool AI stuff you're working on, which is why I want to talk to you.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm supposed to be working on is
that's always a good delineation. Like, this is my job title and this is what I do.
So what I'm supposed to be working on is partner recruiting, partner enablement, and getting partners to source leads. The reality is with Partner World, it's pushing a rope uphill. You cannot force a partner motion to move faster. It will move it. It's like an enterprise deal. It's going to move however it's going to move, and that's what it's going to take, right? And so, I've been spending a lot of time coaching my sales team, building up collateral, trying to figure out how to talk to analysts correctly, trying to figure out how to help others position in our organization. And then, that's everywhere from like tofu, like blog stuff, all the way down to like, hey, let's build this deck or this quote and closing argument for a customer. Right? I really like being involved in the whole process, although, I've got to be careful that I don't spend too much time there because it will draw me
on everything else.
Yeah.
That's the fun of early stage companies though, right? I think that one of the things that I don't know, I have such a weird perspective on this because I spend a lot of time operating and being inside of really early stage stuff, selling to and implementing things for very large scale organizations, partnering with really on the happily side, like small HubSpot solutions partner folks, and then like managing and networking and knowing all the things that the HubSpot, the giant machine, is doing. And so I see companies across this huge stratosphere. And I think what always has excited me is what you're doing now, which is like the small company, do a lot of things, jump into a lot of places, versus like the big company. My role is like 10 words long, like director of strategic alliances for like mid-market in this like, one so narrow. Yeah. And I think for me, I've just always been like, I don't know, maybe it's my own ADD. Like, I'm like, well, what if I did 500 other things at the same time? Maybe like, we don't like that. Like,
that's why you're a CEO, right? You like being an all-rounder.
Maybe. Or I'm a control freak. One of the two actually goes.
Come say,
But before we get to the AI stuff, something you talked about, and I'm just like interested because I just had a trip with some friends, and one of them was telling me about analysts and that being something that they talk to. And in my world, analysts are like all public market investor folks. Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned you think and are doing a lot of the analyst stuff. What does analyst mean to you in Syncari, and what is your engagement with that?
It's a tough question.
Okay, I apologize if the curveball was unplanned.
That's a tough question. Yeah, no, analysts, I mean, it could be anybody from like somebody who's doing like a basic market analysis for some, small website organization that does a market analysis of some kind around a very specific niche solution, potentially even like, hey, how does this work for lead to account matching, right? Or it could be all the way up to Gartner and Forrester, right? Which are, extremely expensive and kind of, pay to play a little bit, but you got to play the game also, especially when you're early stage, because you don't have that huge customer base to draw from and that huge like backing to draw from where you can say, oh yeah, we proved it out with 500 million in ARR that we are successful. You really have to have someone else be
you
like,
can trust us.
yeah, actually, this is a real potential solution, and they're not just like selling you vaporware, right? And
do you think analysts play if you're doing B2B and maybe it's enterprise, maybe it's more mid-markety? Like, at what threshold do you think that's even something worth investing in?
I think if you have a muddy, so like, especially if you have a muddy market, like there's a lot of players in the market and you're having trouble defining yourself in the market. And then you're also like trying to punch up and punch sideways and punch down against everybody else around you. And you have a really hard time.
Like a big punching circle of just...
Yes, like a painful punching circle. Yes. Which is
I'm imagining like a boss in like an 8-bit video game, and it's like a circle with all these just punching like fists coming out of it.
I think like you can even early, like, but SMBs don't care, right? SMBs really don't care at all, right? I could be like, I'm a top Gartner player, and they're like, okay, what's your price? What are you going to do for me today? Right? Like they don't care, right? Like it doesn't matter. But in enterprise or even mid-market, right? Then the analysts are more there because if you think about like a mid-market or enterprise buyer, they buy so very infrequently, right? Like maybe once, twice a year. They don't know how to buy very well, right? And they definitely cannot skill up enough to understand the nuances of your solution unless it is right down the middle of their wheelhouse and something they've worked in before, right? And so they have to like trust something, and they either trust you. That's harder to do when you get to mid-market enterprise. Yeah, because mid-market enterprise, they can't, right? Because if they trust you and they fall, oh, I trusted that sales guy. Well, you're an idiot. But like if you say, hey, I'm a senior IT director, I trusted what Gartner said. You're like, all right, well, Gartner,
good Gartner things, like you can't fire me. Come on.
Yeah, like, I'm doing the things, right? I'm doing the way that, so like it's covering your ass essentially.
God. Incumbents, man, it's crazy. Okay, actual cool. I'm always interested in your perspective on things because you see parts of the world that I don't even get exposed to. What are you working on right now, or what is the coolest? Like, so for context for anybody listening, I may have told this in pre-show, maybe I told it now, but Nate's been listening to the show. He's like, hey, I'm doing a lot of cool stuff. I really want to talk to you about it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm really excited, but I am going to record it and share it with the world. He graciously agreed to come and tell me about it. And so I'm exceedingly interested in what are you working on? What's going on? Tell me what's up.
I've been using AI probably more than I should be, candidly. I actually spend sometimes after hours, like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'm still just messing with models. And it kind of started with, me messing a little bit with ChatGPT when it came out, right? And not long after that, we ended up buying Jasper for internal use at Syncari and using it a bit, right?
Jasper's copy primarily, right?
Yeah, it's copyright. Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. But, it's a reg, which I forget what that stands for, but essentially it's like, hey, it's like got a layer in front of it where it goes and retrieves data sets and brings it back and uses that as a knowledge base, essentially, which I sound super knowledgeable in AI because I can't remember what that means. Anyway, so I used that for a bit, right? But I never found it like super helpful to what I was doing. And so I didn't really use it too much. I used it to test some stuff. I also used Lavender a bit, right? And I'm like, then maybe it's something here, right? And so fast forward, tried GPT a little bit. I hear about like these custom GPTs coming out. I'm like, maybe I can train something. And so I started just messing with it. And it started out with just like, hey, I'm doing outbound prospecting to partners. I wonder if I can just have something that's going to edit my emails or make them better, or just like I can drop in a LinkedIn profile and it'll like tell me kind of what to say to them, right? And this interest actually came about at the same time as I started using Ample Market. Ample Market has a little bit of that. And I was like, oh, it's not quite there, but I see the value, right? And so, I started training this GPT, and I first started off by training it on just a bunch of emails and stuff like that. It did okay.
When you say I'm training on these emails, is it like these are ones that worked, make more like this? These are ones that are bad, make less like this?
Yeah.
I don't mean to just to that level, but like,
no, there's so much to say. Like literally, so most people don't realize how easy it is to go off and train an AI model just for any specific task, right? You can go get an OpenAI license for $20 and you can go train a GPT in something, right? And so what that means is essentially going off and picking a data set, right? If you're really good at it, what I did was I created a GPT to help me create other GPTs, right? Which I trained on best practices around building a GPT, right? I've got one that I built to write prompts for me, right? But that kind of stuff. But in general, taking a bunch of the emails that have worked, taking templates and sequences and things like that I feel were successful or good writing, or at least has a good writing example, and then putting it into the model, right? And saying, hey, your job is to edit emails and tell people best practices. It worked okay, right? It was saving me a little time, right? And I was like showing it to one of my SDRs and they thought it was kind of cool, but wasn't game changing. I started editing it pretty heavily right around Christmas. So I got some downtime, right? Around the Christmas holiday. And I started adding real product docs to it, like and getting it really smart. And it got to a point where like at our SKO this year, none of my senior leadership had seen it. And someone mentioned it to my CEO. My CEO was like, what are you talking about? What's this bot thing?
Yeah.
Right. And so he tries it and he just asks it to write a blog on something like on the spot. And it pushes out this thing that's, like 70%. It's good, right? It's got like a bunch of, and he's like, this stuff's not on the line. How does it know this stuff? All this stuff. And I was just like, all right. So I got validated, right? And now the company's using it a bit. My SDR's got a license. My AEs all have licenses. They're all using the bot I built to like write stuff, to like pull stuff down, right? And so I'm using it heavily. I'm also using Claude by Anthropic because I feel like it has better reasoning. As soon as I actually read the article about it having better reasoning, I went off and checked it out. And within a couple of days, I ended up purchasing a professional license because it is better. It is fundamental. I'd say like it's maybe like a 1.4x of like a GPT-4 at the moment. It's got good reasoning. It's got ability to like take bigger tokens, all this stuff. So basically now what I do, I have my Syncari product expert in GPT, right? And so I'll run research potentially out of Gemini because Gemini is like the free one. Maybe I do it out of GPT, like a normal GPT-4, right? Like, hey, I do this all the time with partners. Hey, I'm building partner profiles right now. So, hey, take this partner. Here's their website. I'd like you to list out all the practices, list out their history, their verticals, what they focus on, and some solutions they have. And then the second prompt is, okay, now how does Syncari align with each of those practices? And how are we going to help them, right? And so it goes, here's their practice. Here's how Syncari fits. Here's the practice. And it gives me this whole cheat sheet on basically how we align with their practice, right? And I use that to help build the business case and help me reach out to these partners. We're also using it for direct sales, right? So like, hey, if we can drop in a gong call, or if we can drop in like a thread of emails plus a gong call and say, hey, here's how we're thinking about this.
Is Gong doing that yet? Native?
Gong is doing a bit of it, but it's not, it's, in my opinion, it's narrow and it's closed. So like you can use AI with a couple of their buttons, but it's not like flexible at all, right?
The thing that I think is so crazy about where we're at right now that I think we'll just look back on and be amazed by is we're in this very like, I use this software product for this like particular workflow or thing. And then I take information from that software product and I put it into the magic box, and then it comes out of the magic box and I put it back into the software product. And it's like, that's like a huge workflow that everyone is doing right now across every part of their job. And it's just like wild.
It is. And, like one of the things I talked to my CTO, he's not going to do it because he's like, Nate's just doing weird hacky things. But I'm like, to do this and I could just run it through a doc and everything. He's like, okay, dude. Because he knows I'm probably going to change the way I do it in the next
Sure.
I'm adapting these all the time. But yeah, I agree with you, right? It's really interesting because like a lot of these tools have brought in AI, but it's narrow and it's not very powerful in what it does. And it really actually, I think it cheapens AI. I agree
with you 100%.
The idea of AI has been cheapened dramatically by, these kind of onesie twosies, little like query thing approaches that really are not valuable, right? Like the stuff I do is fundamentally valuable, right? Like I can build out a full partner profile that has crazy details in like 10 minutes, right? With like a profile for my executive team, right? A profile and a sheet to go off and pitch them, right? And then, all kinds of other stuff alongside that as well as like an evaluation on if they're even a good fit, right? And like it does all that stuff for me. So I like save myself hours of research.
What's the level of like cost basis beyond your team just all having GPT licenses for you to create something like that and then distribute it across your whole organization? And like, is there
the reality is, go ahead.
No, we'll do that, and then I'll ask more questions about it because I'm just interested in what you guys are doing.
It's cheap, right? Like the reality is like for a long time, my SDR would just ping me and he'd be like, hey, just run this through your model, right?
Yeah.
Or like somebody else would be like, run this through your model, right? I don't know if as a company we've even bought a license. I think each of these people are just like, that's going to save me more than $20.
That alone is like pretty crazy, actually, when you think about that. Like I can't think of anything else. Like maybe Superhuman, maybe.
No. That I'm paying out of pocket for mine. I'm paying out of pocket for ChatGPT and Anthropic today because it saves me.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, I don't want to sit there and like evaluate.
How does somebody? So we have like a centralized account. One of the things that hopefully none of our software vendors like listen to this, but one of the things that saves A8 a lot of money is by nature of our work doing systems work for customers, password sharing, password folders, and password distribution is like a part and parcel of what we do. What that means is we get to use a lot of software for single logins because everyone in the organization has to know how to navigate, find, share, access, and manage passwords to different things. And the side effect of that is we're just like, I'm not going to buy fucking 30 Loom licenses.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
I'll buy a Loom license
Yeah.
and everyone can log into it all of the time.
Sorry,
But so we're doing something like that with some of our custom GPTs. And so I have no concept of like what the level of lift it is in order for you to say, hey, I have this, I have a custom GPT. I want someone else on my team to use it.
It's like $20 literally. And like, I can expose
But how does, like, if you have a new SDR and you want to give them access to your custom GPT,
I just send them a link. And
is it private or is it public? You don't care?
choose. I can choose.
You can choose.
I can choose to make it. So I can choose it. It's like Google Drive. So I can be like anybody with a link or anybody in the world can find this. And they have a marketplace where you can like, if you do public, it goes on the marketplace, right? So I wouldn't do that with anything that like has product information in it, right? But like things like the email one, if you want to, right? But I don't care about that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's not like an issue for sure.
But my team just goes off, spends $20 and I expose the link to them and they just go use it, right? And they get their own, the usage doesn't come out of my license. So they get their own usage on it and it really doesn't affect me at all. They just get, as I tune it, they get better results.
I think everyone, so like we have 2 people in our organization who are building these things and sharing them with people and doing it. And I think anyone who wants to have outsized impact on the organization that they are employed by should go and create a custom GPT and just start sharing with people. And the price point is low enough and the accessibility is high enough that it becomes, my assumption is that you've just become the AI guy.
Yeah. It's got
a blessing and a curse, I'm sure.
It is, and I think that I probably upset my marketing team a little bit sometimes because someone's like, "Oh, we got to write a blog on this," and I'm like, 15 minutes later, I've got because it's not like I just type in a query and it's done. I got to do a little tweaking, right?
Yeah, of course.
Change it like this, but maybe 20 minutes later, I got a pretty good, like an 80%. Hey, tweak this, and it's there. And I don't think that makes people feel good sometimes, but it is what it is, right? It's the tooling, and it's super powerful. There's like no reason you shouldn't be using it and kind of customizing it for whatever you're doing. Like it doesn't take very long.
Is there anything that's not, so you talked about like Anthropic, you talked about Claude, you talked about some of these other ones you're getting exposed to. Is there anything that is, you briefly touched on like Ample Market. Is there anything that is a GTM specific tool you're doing really cool stuff with that you think is like exciting? Or is it just all wrappers that are like,
today it feels like all wrappers. It doesn't feel like anything special to me. Every time I tried to use one of those tools, I'm like, maybe it's a little bravado, but like I get in there and I'm like, I think I could build this. So I don't know, obviously like when people are where it starts to be different, right, is when people have built their own LLM, right? And it's not a wraparound GPT and it's a custom built LLM to do a specific task, right? So I recently came across a company called CallSign. Really interesting, right? They're like a Reggie.
What is that? What do they do?
They're like a Reggie competitor or like a Lavender competitor, but they do it. They have their own LLM. And you basically can enter personas, right? Persona types and things like that, and like some descriptions, and they'll go write emails, for different personas that you might sell to with different value props. And the way most of these other tools work is it's one generic set of instructions, and that's it for everything, right? And you can kind of go off and customize instructions, but it still feels like it's a wrapper on top of GPT, because if you ask the wrong prompt, it'll be like, "Oh, Syncari cares about blah blah blah," and I'm like, I didn't say anything about Syncari, right? And that's most of the wrappers. If you train them on something, they often spit out erroneous things because they're just wrappers on top of something that wasn't meant to do what you're doing with it. And so even me, when I'm using like these bots I've built, like I'll use the same query 3 times. It'll work one, right? And I'll just do it again. Okay, cool. It worked. Right. And it's like, no matter how much prompt tweaking and how much time I spend working through it, you just got to know that like a bunch of the times it's not going to work out the way you want it to. And you just got to tweak it unless you built something custom for it. Right. Like these companies are starting to do, but it's really hard. And it's also like really hard to keep up with the speed of evolution. And so I would be really scared to go off and build my LLM right now because
how do you differentiate? So the thing that's interesting, right? Like I'm an analyst of all this stuff. I'm not as much the buyer. Right. And I think the thing that's interesting
analyst, man.
Boom, there you go. Analyst relations. Logging time to this category. Yeah, So I think most of the AI products that seem to be coming to market and being loud and doing all these things are largely in GTM stuff. And the reason is most GTM stuff is written and or verbal and then transcribed. And so it's really easy to put into AI tooling. And a lot of GTM stuff is shallow in that you don't really need to go that deep or do that much in order to have something that like, look, we have a product, we're going to sell it, we're going to do stuff with it, it exists now, which I think is sort of Right, exactly. Like so easy to spin up. And it's kind of what you're describing of like I subscribe to this great newsletter. I think it's called Superhuman, but if you try to subscribe to it, it does something else. I don't remember. I can find it. So sorry if I missed the plug for these folks, but it's really good. But every week or every day, they have a section of like, oh, all these AI tools. After a couple of weeks, I'm like, wasn't there something else by a different name like 2 weeks ago that was doing this? And it all gets really noisy. And I think to your point, the reason is because it's really easy to wrap a basic front end around AI and GPT and say, hey, we made this product for this thing. And it has maybe some custom instructions and a UI and it's nothing else. How do you differentiate or even like filter out the noise of what is BS useless stuff and what's actually interesting?
Yeah, it's actually been something I've been, so we're thinking about doing a lot more AI partnerships as everybody is right now, right? And partnerships is my wheelhouse, and so I've been diving in, and regularly I think I found something kind of cool, and my CTO's like, "That's stupid," and somebody else has done like 4 of those, and I'm like, yeah, I gotcha. So I'm getting better, right? And I think what you kind of have to realize is like, all right, is this like, does this look like it's a first off, I mean, you can read what it does, right? Does this seem like something that I could build myself, potentially, right? And then like, two, like, what's the lift to do that, right? Because there's value in something you can build yourself as long as it's like too hard to build yourself or it's not worth it, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm looking for people that have their own models and their own things that they've kind of went off and designed without, of course, like using training models from Hugging Face and like all these tools, like that's going to happen. But if you're not building it custom for something, then I really don't see value in it unless you have built a better way to string things together. And so it makes my workflow better, right? I mean, think of it like outreach, right? Like outreach was just helping you send emails and sequence people, but people were doing this manually before, right? In fact, I remember sending emails off a document and being like, oh, document to copy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did I left their first name on there? No.
One of the early like sales consulting things that we would do, this was ages ago, but post my VC life and then doing like growth consult. It's so funny because now I roll my eyes at these fucking people and I'm like, I am these fucking people.
Yeah.
We were doing the growth consulting stuff. We would literally just go and be like, oh, we'll interview sales teams. We'll look at all the documentation. We'll give you like a Google Doc of templates. And then outreach came along. And then for a while we were like, reselling. I think they're doing the partnerships thing now too, but they didn't really grow that way in the beginning. Yeah. And we were like an early outreach partner and we were just like setting up outreach and putting sales reps on it. And the difference between, hey, we emailed you a Google Doc and like we onboarded your team to outreach, we like could 5x what we were charging people for this thing. And all we were doing is the exact same, like you just have these 5 emails. Like,
yeah, but now they're in a sequence and it's a workflow now. Yeah. They're just automated for you. That's expensive.
Yeah. I mean, that's a product that I think, I don't know. I think it's one of those things that's a good moment in time where it was so impactful. Like it really did change how everyone was doing all of those functions and shifted
I feel like
the entirety of the sales workflow.
Yeah. I feel like they squandered it a bit. I feel like they went the wrong direction with it, right? Like, in my opinion, we don't have to talk about that because
that's another good combo. I don't necessarily disagree. The only thing that I will say to outreach, they think that they went into the partnerships universe and I think did not execute on that as well as, and I think they had a lot of opportunity to execute on it really well and to have a HubSpot level universe around them. And I don't know if that was a strategic decision. I don't know if it was a fumble. Like I have no idea, but
SalesLoft didn't do it either, right? I mean, I've tried to partner with them at both the companies I've been at and might be like, well, there's early stage startup. Workato is now like $1 billion company, right? I don't think they've still probably not partnered, right? So anyway, I would say that the other problem with these wrappers, right? So when you're trying to figure out what's real and what's not, the other problem is like when you find a real thing, like one of our customers is Deepgram, right? They've been doing AI for 6 or 7 years around voice, right? Just voice recognition, turning that into text, translating. They're adding features there, right? But it does this, right? It does this narrow thing. If you need that, it's probably the best out there to do it. Yeah. But that's the problem with these, like if you want a general AI that can do a lot, that's a ChatGPT. But it also,
do you think that people want like, do you think the general it can do a lot is because like SaaS is, I don't know, maybe this is the other interesting thing, right? SaaS really started in the early days is like, we'll pick a particular workflow, we'll build a very dedicated solution for it, like an outreach or like a SalesLoft that does this particular thing. And we will build a company and build a product around that solution. And now everyone is moving to, we'll build platforms and the platforms will have extensibility and interoperability and they can do a lot of things and everybody wants a lot of flexibility. Does that same trend extend to AI as a technology and platform, and we just say we want something that is capable of doing all sorts of stuff, or do I really want something that's built for a particular use case?
I think that the best path is going to be multiple specific AIs that are good at specific tasks, and that's how I found to work with the AIs the best too, right? I mean, even when I'm using a GPT workflow, I'll call in 3 different GPTs to help me, right? One will be like a research, one will be like a Syncari expert, and then one will be an email writing expert, right? And I've got each of those, and they're each one after another. Okay, cool. Now this, and now generate some potential templates. Now pick your favorite one. Right. One of the things I can go into prompt engineering separately, but like one of the it is like definitely a specificity game, I think, at this point, right? Because you're never going to be able to build a general AI that's as good at a function as a purpose trained AI, right? And those will win out in the long run. The question becomes like, okay, do those win out in a white label motion where they're embedded in other tools, or are they standalones? And I think there's like a bit of both being played out in the market right now. Like I mentioned Jasper earlier. They're doing a big partner play where they're working to embed their, thing in all kinds of products and businesses, right? Who knows, right?
Yeah, I'll go the same way as all the other software. How do you think about, I mean, you are in a growing startup, you're building a team, you're seeing the organization scale and grow. How is some of the stuff that's happening right now changing your view of what types of roles you're hiring, when you're hiring for it, how you're thinking about spend generally, but maybe more attached to like staffing and the team that you need in order to get things done? Is it less people? Is it different people? Is it like, how does it change how you're thinking about what a team looks like in the future?
It's a good question. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to hire anybody that doesn't know AI reasonably okay, because I feel like it is a force multiplier, right? And it's like, oh, I don't know Salesforce. Okay, cool. I got to train you on that so you can actually be as functional as everybody else across the business, right? And, maybe you do, but it depends. But I would say like, potentially less hiring, right? Like we have an offshore team that we work with for some of our, data entry stuff, right? The other day, my VP asked a question about like, hey, we're about to load this thing on the website. What's the right codec and blah, blah, blah. Can you go do some research for it? Dropped it in my bot, gave it all the details. It spat out exactly what they should do. And I dropped it and she's like, oh, thanks for the AI output. Can you go double check this, whatever? Double check it. She's like, that's exactly what we should do. I'm like, okay, right? But it's like, okay, well, that might have taken someone 4 hours before, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is, by the way, I don't think anybody wants to do those freaking jobs. Those are awful jobs, right? Like we say that, I think it's easy to say that from an automation place where we're like, we're not replacing jobs. We're taking the bad jobs away. Yeah, but then somebody doesn't have a job, right? So it's hard to be a good steward of humanity and lean into AI, but I think you got to do what you got to do, right?
I don't think it's that bleak. I think to your point, I think there are very few entire jobs and functions that can get completely replaced by AI. And I think what ends up happening is you have people who are a lot more effective, a lot more productive. And I think it's not a zero-sum game. And when organizations can get more done, they'll just get more done. They don't just like have a static level of investment. And I think as people get more done, you find other ways to deploy your human capital and it gets there. But I think to your point, the skilling that is I mean, I don't know. Someone should build a let me GPT that for me, and I'll use it as liberally as I probably still use let me Google that for you. But I'll very often see questions in our organization that's like, oh, well, how could I do this, that, or the other thing in Slack? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm like pretty sure you could chat GPT that and it'd be fine. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, 100%. And then we do it, and they're like, holy shit. I'm like, I know.
I told you. I do it all the time. I mean, I use it in my personal life. I use it yesterday. I was like, okay, I only have bell peppers, onions that are going to go bad. I have to use
dude, I did this like
and it'll spit out recipes. And then you're like, well, I got this too. Well, should I add it? And they're like, if you do that, it look like this and like this cookie. Yeah. You're like, all right, this is phenomenal, right? But like,
it's amazing.
It's amazing for stuff like that. But I think like the idea that like an agent will ever be able to do everything the best, I don't think is reality. I think what we will end up having is a group of agents that surround each human in their personal life. And in their professional life, right? And they are.
I know that Bezos is like on a yacht, just chilling right now, and at this point, but I feel like Alexa there's nothing. Maybe like Siri, yes, but like not as tied to home. Like I just think, what an opportunity.
I've been waiting for Google to release Gemini for home, even though Gemini is not like my least favorite out of all of them. That has become like. Yeah, not great. It actually has gotten worse, I feel like. But anyway, neither here nor there. But yeah, I've been trying to get it on my home, and it's like, it's awful. It's like an awful experience. It's like, I've tried to load it on there twice, and like every time I do, it like just starts failing out on my phone, and like it doesn't answer some of the questions. Yesterday, I asked my phone to play Spotify. It's like, I can't play Spotify. I'm like, the old dumb one could play Spotify. I don't understand.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. But okay. So I don't know. It is interesting to me. Same thing, but I think it's because it's so generally released that they're just being very careful, because you can't. Yeah. Today it's like, like I said, same prompt, different responses 3 times, right? Until I get the response I want. You cannot have that at a consumer level.
Yeah.
Which brings me to prompt engineering, yes, which is something that a lot of people should think about too, right? And a lot of people are just dropping in prompts, right? But if you start looking into prompt engineering, it's literally like it's 15, 30 minutes. You can really actually level yourself up to do things like tree of thought, right? Which is essentially like, show me your work, right? You just basically ask it, or like, hey, build a virtual scratch pad and work on that and double check your work. Yesterday I did one where I was like, hey, bot, before you send this to me, step back, pretend you're your manager, review this. Are you proud of what you put out, right? Make it so you're proud of it.
Okay, I have to tell anyone. I have to tell anyone who's listening to this that like what you are saying right now may sound ridiculous if you are not paying attention to this, but it is absolutely true. And there is literal AI researchers that no one knows why, but if you tell the bot that you will tip it for good performance, it literally has better answers.
I did one yesterday. It responded and I was like, I think you can do better than that. And great response, phenomenal response. Then I said, thank you. And it's like, thank you. I really appreciate you. And I'm like, it actually helps too. Please and thank you to an AI model actually gets you better responses. People don't realize that either, right? I'm getting more polite in my writing too, which is good.
The side effect is I'm a much kinder writer than another one. I actually, someone on my team, when I sent them the to your point, when I sent them like a screenshot of like a chat GPT thing we were doing, and they're like, wow, you're way nicer to the AI than you are to me in Slack all the time.
Well, I don't have to be nice to you.
But I actually find an inverse correlation between my kindness and your performance. So it's far better.
The opposite of the AI, actually.
Well, one last question I want to ask you before we run out of time, which is something you talked about. You mentioned both 2 terms that one which we hear a lot, and I can't decide if I think is brilliant or cringy, which is prompt engineering. And the other, which I actually think is novel, more interesting, is AI literacy. And where would you put when you're thinking about hiring, working somewhere, doing something like I don't know, maybe define AI literacy, and also how important do you think that is now and will become?
I think it's super important. I think AI literacy is a spectrum, obviously, and it's between like, hey, do I know what an AI is? And do I know how to write a very complex prompt or a series of prompts, right? And so like AI literacy is probably like, hey, do I understand what an AI can do task-wise? And do I understand how to get it to do that task for me effectively on a regular basis, right? That's probably AI literacy in my mind. And yeah, prompt engineering, I think, is probably going to go away, but with the caveat that I think most people are not used to thinking the way computers think, right? I'm much closer to that because I've been at Workato and Syncari where I have to do decision trees all day and think about that kind of stuff, right? Most people don't think like that. So they're like, why is the AI not working? It's like, because of what you told it.
It doesn't, right? It only knows those things.
It is hyper literal. It does exactly what you tell it to do, right? And if you did not do a good job describing it, that's what happens, right?
The connection I just made that feels inspired by what you just said is like, when I think of AI literacy, I think about it as a low bar, but I think the comparison you just made, right, is like, it's not that different of a framework or way of thinking than like solutions architecture of what is technology capable of and what do APIs do and how can I connect them? And that's not it's a technical skill set, but it's not an engineering or development skill set. And I think, I don't know, I'm wondering, am I wrong about either how hard or how valuable AI literacy is? Because when I think of solutions architecture, I think about it as somewhat like higher on the difficulty chain and higher on the value chain. Whereas I think of AI literacy as like higher on the value chain, but lower on the difficulty chain. And maybe that's just wrong because I'm coming from a perspective of previously existing knowledge.
I think it's also depending on what you're doing, right? I mean, like some of the process I'm doing yesterday, I'm using like 2 different models and, like it's 15 minutes across like 3 or 4 different prompts that I spent a bunch of time working on the prompts for, right? It's not like it's simple, right? But at the same time, it's not like it's writing code. So yeah, I think data literacy, that's a term we use all the time. Sorry. AI literacy is yeah, it's literally just like being able to understand what's possible too, because like there's a lot of times people go try to use AI and then they're like, why is it not working? And it's literally because like they don't, whether they don't have the grit to like keep trying different ways until they're like, oh, wait, I got the result, or they just don't understand that, hey, like there's nuances, right? And they give up, right? Or they just think it's a toy, right? And I think there's tons of people I talk to that are like, oh yeah, it's still nascent. I'm like, cool. I'm probably saving like 10, 15 hours a week from my team at least, like half a head count. That's great. We're not a big company, right? Like,
Yeah, it's significant. Yeah.
yeah.
What last thing for you, and then I can let you go, which is for anyone who has listened to this, is interested and excited about accessibility for some of the custom GPT stuff, where should they start?
I would just start on GPT. You know what's funny? I mean, the thing is, most of the AIs also are great teachers,
Yeah.
right? Like you can ask them
Go to ChatGPT and say, "Can you help me make a custom GPT, please?"
Yeah, that's what I did my first time, and I've asked it, explain tree of thought prompting to me, explain prompt engineering, right? Like I use it to teach me all kinds of stuff. Like I level up so much faster now just because I can ask it things and have it explain things to me in detail that I couldn't before. So yeah, I would say get started by just getting started and just start messing with it. The more you mess with it, might feel like a waste of time at first. The more you mess with it, the more you'll start being like, oh, I could drop this. I just dropped this like entire picture. Like it was a picture of every single vendor at a trade show because they couldn't pull out the list, right? And so it was like 40 screenshots. I just dropped those in AI. It built a list as a CSV, gave me the CSV. I'm like, cool, that was easy, right? Would have taken me 30 minutes before, right? All that kind of stuff. It's like there's some basic stuff it can do without very much effort at all. Just get started.
Oh, Nate, as always, lovely to talk to you. Always love being able to connect. And I always both have so much fun as well as learn so much. And I appreciate you sharing some of your time with us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, man. It's great.
I'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Go to Market with AI. This episode was produced by Ryan Gunn, Jordan Michaelitis, and Sassly.video. Until next time, this is Connor Jeffers. Stay curious, stay innovative, and embrace our robot overlords.